time to offer small, in a sense, Bible study or hymnology study of the services of the church. There's so much here, it would take a lifetime to understand them, but it's good to begin to focus. So I hope that you realize that this evening's service is really the orthros service for tomorrow. So in Greece, this service would be done Monday morning. So to Nifiu is a orthros service, just like we do on a Sunday in the morning. But because in America people typically don't come to church in the morning, they go to work, they moved the orthros service from the morning, Monday morning, and we do it as a harbinger, so to speak, as a preparation of the presanctified liturgy on the night before. So I want you to know this is not a Vesper service, this is not an Apodimno service, this is an Orthros service. That's why you heard that we say Tinimera as opposed to Tinispera. So you might say, well, it's evening, it should be Tinispera, but because the service is Orthros, it's Tinimera. And the reason for that is that in the Orthodox tradition, just like the Jewish tradition, we calculated the days from sunset to sunset. So if you go to the book of Genesis and you look at the way the days are numbered, you see that they are numbered as the sun goes down, the day begins, not as the sun comes up. And that's very significant in the church for us. So this is an Orthros service. So as at any Orthros service, if you want to know what the service is about, you go to the Synexarion. So if you go to the Synexarion of today, we read it in Greek and in English, you would know that today we celebrate two things. So what's the focus of today's Orthros service? No, that was Sunday. To Yaakov, right? Joseph, and the fig tree. Joseph and the fig tree. So someone would say, that's somewhat strange. Why would you connect Joseph of the Old Testament to the fig tree? What's the connection there? So we have to see how they connect. Before we move and answer you that question, of course, I pass this out to you. This is the icon, or one icon, there are many different icons, of Jesus coming into Jerusalem. This is Palm Sunday, just like I spoke to you today. And there are so many things in this icon, sometimes hidden, and you have to see them, or someone has to point them out to you. And there's a number of important things here in this icon, but one in particular for Holy Week and for us. Where do you think it is? Could be Zacchaeus up in the tree. We see children up in the tree. That's not it though, that's kind of in the past, but that's one of the things that's in there, it's correct. What else do you see in that icon that stands out to you? When you look at the left and you see the mountain and you see the rocks there, you see a mouth. Right. That's supposed to be their mouth, stoma. Because Jesus said, even if I were to tell the children, do not say Hosanna, the rocks would sing. So in the icon, the iconographer puts a mouth there, that even the rocks have in a sense, a pneuma, have a soul, and out of the rocks would come a glorification to God. And even though that's kind of neat, and I like that, I'm sure you like it too, that's still not what's important for Holy Week. Something else. If you know this, I would be very, very impressed. Because it takes some degree of theological understanding to see it. But it's very subtle, but very powerful. And when I point it out to you, you will look at other icons, and you'll say, well, it's not in all of the other icons, but in this one it's in there. It's not in that one, but it's in this one. This is more powerful theological. That's why it was chosen in the people who print this. They chose this icon as opposed to that icon because of this little thing. And as a teacher, I like my students to suffer a little bit. That's why I'm not giving you the answer too quickly. Because when you suffer and then you learn, you see it, it leaves more of an impression on you.
Is it the harp? Is that a harp?
No, no harp, although that I'm not sure if it is. It could be, but that's not it. You're getting closer though. On the left, on the bottom, you see two children.
Right.
And what are they doing?
They put in something so the Jesus will pass.
More to the left, the other two children.
Okay.
What are they doing?
Are they braiding branches? Are they
Is it Bible?
braiding palms?
No? They're making palms. They should have been here Saturday morning. No, if you were to see it, if you had a facot, you know, a magnifying glass, and you were able to see the icon, you would see that one child is pulling a thorn out of the leg of another child.
Oh.
See, I like it when students go, oh, and that's nice, that's the aha experience. So you're seeing something there now, and you say, what on earth, what has two children, what does that have to do with Palm Sunday? What does that have to do with anything that's going on here? Well, what the iconographer is doing here is trying to say that when we follow Jesus into Jerusalem for his crucifixion, we too will be hurt, we will be pinched, it's difficult, we will experience thorns. It is not an easy journey. And each of us has to help one another by pulling the thorn out of our leg as we move through, as we go along. It's a very nice image here, that although the children are saying Hosanna in the highest, and oh, Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, while they are doing that, at the same time, if they follow him, they're going to feel some pain. They're going to feel the thorn. They're going to feel the crucifixion in one way or another, and we have to help one another as we are walking through. So in a sense, this is what we're doing. So when we stop and we are studying, we are in a sense taking the thorn out of each other. We're helping so that we can keep walking, we can keep moving in the right direction. I've always liked that. When someone first showed me that many decades ago, it really, you know, because it's significant in our spiritual walk, that it's not easy, and we need each other to get through. So, going back now to the answer, what does the fig tree have to do, the withering of the fig tree have to do with Joseph? And of course, we're not talking about Joseph of Arimathea, we're not talking about Joseph, the husband of Mary. We're talking about Joseph in the Old Testament, right? What do you know of him? His brothers sold him. Well, they sold him to slave owners. They didn't know where he was going to end up. And they put him in the pit. Joseph, throughout Holy Week, is another key, because Joseph is an image of Jesus. He was sold to by his brothers, in a sense, right? He was crucified. His father sent him. His father loved him. So there are many parallels that we will see in the hymnology. The hymn writers like that. They like to, they call it typology. They like to find something in the Old Testament and connect it to the New Testament as a type, they call it, typos, of Jesus. So they sold him, and he was taken by the slave owners. And where did he end up?
Egypt.
Ended up in Egypt. Where in particular? Before that,
he worked for some landlord, and before he sees the dream and Pharaoh's dream and translated.
okay, so yes, he is bought as a slave by Potiphar. His name is Potiphar, who was a wealthy slave owner, but he was also in royalty in the court of the Egyptians. This is very important. So he gets bought, and what does he do for Potiphar? What's his job as a slave? To take care of everything, his household. And he is such a good servant, he is such a good slave, that Potiphar gives him more and more responsibility. Anything in my house, you can take care of it. Then what happens? And this is very important that we know the story. Then I go, you were too far away.
His brothers went to buy food.
Before that, way before that. Before that, yes. That we're going to see that Wednesday night. Today, earlier. And I'm taking time here because this is why he's on Sunday, which is Monday morning.
The wife of the king.
Not the king, Potiphar, his master, tried to seduce him. Remember? And she said, I want you to have sex with me. He's given you the entire household. You can have me too. And what does he do? He says no, he runs away, even though she's giving permission, and he's a slave. You have to see that. He's taking care of his master. No, he says, I'm not going to do that because my master has not said it. Just because you say it, no. And as he runs, what does she do? This is, again, very important. Grabs what? His cloak. And she takes his cloak. And then so he runs away. Is he naked?
Yes.
How do you know? If you go to the Old Testament, it doesn't answer that question. But in the hymns, it does. If you go to the Apostica, if you have the book, I don't know what page is in the black book. But again, the hymns are Bible studies. So when you read the hymns, they're explaining the Bible. But if you don't know the Bible, then you're not going to understand the hymns. So it goes back and forth. So the Apostica, which we just sang, it says, seeing the Egyptian woman, and it says here in the Greek, Defteran evant in Egyptian Evron odakron. See, the Greek, just because you hear it in Greek doesn't mean you're going to understand it, because the Greek is very difficult. So in the Greek, seeing the Egyptian woman as a second Eve. So now you see the connection. The hymn writer says, when you see Joseph there, and the woman, Potiphar, is taking his clothes, she is like Eve. Eve stole the clothing of Adam by tempting him, and Adam said yes. Here is Joseph saying no, and he runs away, and she grabs his cloak. Now why is that important here? It's important because he got into trouble. Why did his brothers sell him? Yes, but what exactly were they jealous of?
It was the father's preferred son.
Yeah, the father loved him, preferred. And what did the father give him to express his love? There you go, a cloak of many colors. You see, which represents royalty. They didn't like it. The other brothers didn't like it. And they sold him, and what did they do with this cloak? They put blood on it to pretend that he was dead, and they showed the cloak to his father and said to Jacob, and said, look, your son is dead. We found his cloak, it has blood on it. You see the connection with Jesus now? Now you understand when he was on the cross, they took his cloak off and they sold it, and they were throwing dice, Zaya for it. They were gambling, the soldiers, over his robe. It connects to Jacob, it connects to Joseph. But if you don't understand the Old Testament, you miss it. You miss it, the powerful message there. So the church is going back and forth. The church fathers are going back and forth. But if we don't know the story, whoop, right over our heads. So the cloak is what his father gave him, taken away by his sons, his brothers. And now the cloak that was given to him by the master is taken away too. So in a gymnos, in other words, he has nothing left here but what God has given to him. Listen to the hymn again. Seeing the Egyptian woman as a second Eve, the serpent strove by flattery to cause Joseph downfall. Oh, you're handsome, lie with me, it says. He says, no. She takes the tunic, and it says here, but he, leaving his cloak behind, fled from sin. See the connection here? So there is this business of, as we move towards the Pascha, we have to be humble. We need to let go of whatever we think is our royalty. And ultimately we are naked before God. And then it says, and though naked, there's the answer. Now we know. The church fathers say the way to interpret the Old Testament is that when he fled and the Egyptian woman who was like Eve took his tunic from him, he was naked. It says, and though naked, like our first parents before the fall, he was unashamed. Notice what's going on here. So in the Old Testament, when Adam and Eve sinned and they looked at their nakedness, they were ashamed and they covered themselves. Now let me open a parenthesis here because this is kind of funny. You know, the Jewish rabbis, they love humor. I took a course many years ago, and we studied the book of Genesis in Hebrew. So I studied it in Hebrew with a rabbi. So the rabbi says, you Christians, you don't know how to read the Old Testament. We said, what do you mean by that? He said, because it's all jokes. They're all jokes in the Old Testament. You miss it because you don't understand Hebrew. So he shared with us the following. He says, here's Adam and Eve. Eve goes to him and says, if you eat this fruit, we're going to become like God. We're going to be really smart. We're going to become like him. So Adam says, okay. So they eat the fruit. What is the first thing they do when they eat the fruit? They cover themselves because they see their nakedness. What do they choose to cover themselves with?
The leaves.
Ah, here we go now. Here's that fig tree business. They cover themselves with the leaves from a fig tree. Now, I don't know if you've ever touched the fig tree. That's the worst thing in the world to cover yourself with. It's itchy. I don't know if you remember, as I do, I'm older maybe than some of you, in Laugh-In. Remember the thing Laugh-In? You don't remember, see? Well, Laugh-In was on television, and the guy that played Adam was always scratching himself. And you see sometimes when they show Adam and Eve, they have fig leaves and they're scratching. That's good theology, because the fig tree is the worst thing in the world to cover yourself with. So the rabbi says, see, that's a joke in the Old Testament. In other words, in their great knowledge, in their great wisdom, they just ate the apple. The first thing they do is they cover themselves with fig leaves. How stupid. In other words, we should laugh and say, this is something that shows how foolish they were, not how smart they were. So what does Jesus do? What does God do, I should say, in the book of Genesis? They hide from him, right? And he goes looking for them. He finds them, of course. How can you hide from God? He finds them. And what does he say to them? Look at you. Who told you you were naked? Well, you ate the tree. You ate of the fruit. And you cover yourselves with fig leaves? So what does he do? See how you don't know your Bible? You don't know your Bible, you're going to miss the whole Holy Week. What does God do in the Garden of Eden when he sees Adam and Eve clothed in fig leaves?
Tell them to leave.
Before that. Oh, this is really important. This is the whole thing. This is what the church fathers call the first gospel, the proto-evangelium. This is a trick question in theological schools. They say, which is the first gospel? Oh, Matthew. Wrong. The first gospel is the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis is the first gospel. It's there. You got to see it. St. Irenaeus tells us. What does God do to Adam and Eve when he finds them hiding, clothed in fig leaves? I want you to suffer a little bit. And I know you don't know, so I will tell you. He takes the fig leaves off them, and he clothes them. He reclothes them. In what? In skins. In skins. So what does that mean? If you clothe someone in skin, what does that mean? Where did you get the skin?
The animals.
You have to kill something to put a skin. So the question is, God killed something in the Garden of Eden to clothe Adam and Eve after he took off the garments that they put on? What did he kill? Think about it. His son. He is clothing Adam and Eve in the clothing of the new man in the garden. Think about that for a minute. That's why we sing Osis Christon Evaptisate, Christon Enedisate. Hallelujah. As many, in English, as many as have been baptized into Christ have what? Put on Christ. Where does that come from? That's the first evangelion that comes in the book of Genesis. So God in the book of Genesis foreknew, he knew back then, that his son would die and we would be clothed by him in the garments of who he is. This is very, very, very important in the church. Very, very important. And this is the reason why it's connected to the first Orthodox service of Holy Week. The fig tree and Joseph. Because when we are clothed in the clothing that we choose, it leads to sin, it leads to death, it leads to saying yes to Potiphar, whoever Potiphar is in this world. But when we say no to this world, and we run out naked, God will reclothe us in the clothing of his son when we are baptized. The next line in the book of Genesis, after he does that, he throws them out. He casts them out. And as he casts them out, he says something to them. He says to Adam, you will work and you will toil. The earth, you will work the ground, and it will not give you what you want. What will it give you? Thorns. You will work the ground, and you'll want it to give you something, but because of sin, you will work it, and it will give you thorns. Here's it is again. Here's this business of the thorns in the icon of the Palm Sunday. That when we work the ground, that's why in the icon, the boys are near the ground. They're near the bottom there. That if you try to do it on your own, you're going to be pulling thorns out of each other. You cannot do it. You have to look to Jesus Christ to save you. He says to the Adam, you will go out, you will work, and there will always be enmity. I don't know what word in Greek I would use. A problem between you and the earth. It won't give you what you want. Give me a Greek word for that. No? Well, carpophoresi is, it's going to give you something.
It's not going to.
I'm looking for a word that it's not going to give it to you. You will work it and it won't give you what you want. You will sweat, it says. You will sweat and you will work and it will not give you what you want. It will not satisfy you, the ground. And then he turns to the woman and what does he say? Here's the first evangelion. He says, someday your seed, and a woman doesn't have seed, right? That's why it's the first evangelion. He's telling the woman, from your seed will come someone who the serpent will bite on the foot, and he will step on the serpent's head. That's why we say, Christos anesti ek neknon, thanaton thanaton. It's from here, from the book of Genesis. When God says, there will come someone who the serpent will bite. He dies on the cross. He is bitten, but he will step on the serpent's head. And that's why we will see the icon of the Anastasy, and you'll see that Jesus is standing on, his foot is standing on Satan, because of what I'm telling you, because of this third chapter of the book of Genesis. All of this theology is in the hymns that we just sang tonight. But if no one shows them to you and talks to you about them, right over your head. And you say, ah, how beautiful, the icons, the hymns, but we don't understand the theology, the food that God is giving us through the hymn writers of the church. That's why it's very, very important. So one more tidbit, and then I will stop. And that is, why the mother and the young donkey this morning? I don't like anything that I read, and I always ask the question, there's got to be something here. Jesus said to his disciples, he sent two of them to go get two donkeys. They're ready. One is tied, one is not. One is older, one is younger. We don't even know who the two disciples are, which is very interesting. He sends them to go get it. If someone says, what are you doing? The master has it, you can have them, and they do it. Why two? Did he sit on two? No, he only sat on one. So why is St. Matthew, St. Luke, St. John doesn't tell us, but St. Matthew and St. Luke and Mark talk about the two donkeys? Why? So if you go to the church fathers, of course, they're not going to leave anything unturned. They give us the answer. And their answer is, this is 2nd century, they say, the two donkeys represent the Jewish faith, the Jewish people, the leaders, and the Gentiles, the Greeks, those who were not Jews. So, who's who? The mother donkey are the Jews. They've been with him, with God, from the beginning. But unfortunately, like a donkey, they are what?
They don't change.
They don't change. They have their way. Even if God were to come to them, no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to kill him. We're going to murder him. We don't like it. This is what we want. Forget what God wants. This is what we want. Okay? The young donkey, still tied, doesn't have any path yet. It's, as I said this morning, malleable. It can be directed. So he sits on the young donkey, but he brings the older donkey too. So the Jews, when they saw that, trust me, they knew what was going on. They saw it because his entire life when he was preaching, Jesus was always saying, the Jews, you people, you don't listen to God. He was constantly berating them. As a matter of fact, if you look at that story, right after that story, what does he do? He goes into the temple, and he screams and he yells at the Jews, saying, you've turned my temple into a den of thieves. We're going to kill you, and we're going to kill Lazarus too if we can get a hold of him. Why? Because the people are going after you, and it says the answer. When people say, why did the Jews crucify Jesus? There's the answer. It says it right there. It says, because they were jealous of him. People were going to him, and they didn't want to change. So what Jesus is saying in the Palm Sunday is that, you know what, if the Jews don't follow me, I'm going to ride with the Gentiles. I'm going to ride a new church. We're going to go a new way, a new path. And this is what we're all about tonight. Because the Jews were the fig tree that they looked good, but there was nothing there. And that's why he cursed it. The fig tree, according to the hymns that we read, go back and take a look at them, it had leaves, but it didn't have what? And that's the worst thing in the world. Because a fig tree, when it has leaves, it should have fruit. The leaves say that it has fruit. So here's Jesus, here's God. He sees the tree, it has leaves. He goes to the tree because it says, come to me, I have fruit. He goes, nothing. And he curses it. And of course, it's there as a theological lesson to us. So, to make a long story short and to bring this evening to a close, are we like Joseph, or are we like the fig tree? Are we like the young donkey, or are we like the old donkey? And we can only talk about the Greek Orthodox Church, it's just us. And not only about the church, ourselves. Are we so set in our ways that even if someone gives us the truth, we don't accept it. We want what we want. Or are we malleable? Are we humble enough to say, you know, I keep my head down just like that donkey, and where Jesus leads, I will go. And if I'm tempted, I will take off this world, the cloaks of this world, and even though I am naked, Jesus will clothe me in royalty. Because what happened to Joseph ultimately? She went to Potiphar, went to her husband, and said that he tried to rape me. Lie. He believed it, put him in prison. What happened when he was in prison? Someone saw that he could read dreams.
Was there and so translated the dream and so.
From there he went to Pharaoh, he interpreted his dream, and before you know it, he became the Lord of the second in command of all of Egypt. So ultimately it says here that when we are loyal to Christ, when we are truthful to God, even though it might appear on the short term that we end up suffering and we have thorns, in the long term we can be put as a prince somewhere, in a sense, and we can do his work. In other words, he's in control. People can try to do whatever they want to us, but when we are loyal to him, he will be loyal to us. Whereas the Pharisees, although Joseph goes naked, he has nothing. The Pharisees, they look good, but in reality, inside, nothing. So that's the difference tonight. So the hymns are saying, as you move towards now the Pascha, think about yourself. What are you like? Are you like the young donkey, the old donkey? Are you like the Pharisees, or are you like Joseph? Move carefully, accept Christ, and be humble. Take the thorn out of the leg of other people as they take the thorn out of your leg. We work together and we move closer and closer to Pascha. So I hope this was helpful to you as spiritual food as we move closer and closer to the resurrection of Christ. Tomorrow evening we will do the same thing. We will do the service, we'll stop, and then we'll look at the hymns from a biblical point of view and see what are the hymns trying to tell us, what are they trying to teach us. So come prayerfully now to kiss the icon as Manayoti, is he there? Sings some of the hymns, and then go quietly on your way.